So next up, we are going to hear from Emma Townley-Smith and Uyen Phan. They are both from Teladoc, and they're going to talk about For You, By You, empowering choice and maximizing impact in daily health decisions. And again, I think this is a particularly timely presentation given where Teladoc sits in the healthcare space and what we've all experienced in the last year with the pandemic and some of the changes to how we interact with the healthcare ecosystem. So I'm, again, really excited to hear this. So let me stop sharing and I will hand it over to our presenters.
Great, thanks so much for the introduction, Amy. I'm going to start sharing. And everyone can see the presentation okay? Yep, great. Okay, great. So Emma and I have actually been working together for over 3 years, originally at a health tech company called Livongo, which offers programs to help people manage chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, and weight. Today, we're going to talk about our journey to build a digital experience to help people integrate the different tools and features we provide into their day-to-day lives. So last year, Livongo was actually acquired by Teladoc, and our mission now as a combined company is to empower all people everywhere to live their healthiest lives by transforming the healthcare experience. Part of this mission continues to be managing chronic conditions, which is a large and important problem to solve, especially in the US, where around 40% of adults have 2 or more chronic health conditions. Before we go further in the talk, a chronic disease is defined broadly as a condition that lasts a year or more and requires ongoing medical attention or limits activities of daily living or both. So there are common problems that people with chronic conditions face when trying to get healthier. One, they're asked to monitor their numbers, like constantly checking their blood sugar or taking blood pressure readings, but might not know what they mean, or more importantly, what they can do about these numbers. Chronic conditions can also be well managed with lifestyle changes like weight reduction, diet, and exercise, but people don't often know how to implement or sustain these changes in their own lives. Then there's medication, which plays a critical role, but is often not taken by individuals or not prescribed at the right dose by the physician, and not always intensified through the course of treatment to help individuals reach their target goal. Overall, managing chronic conditions can be really overwhelming, especially nowadays when there's so much information on the internet, which can mostly be generalized, static, and not cater to an individual's personal journey. The lack of clarity on the steps to take creates a barrier to making progress. Current experiences in healthcare also tend to engage only the most motivated, proactive people who seek help and can piece together all of the different resources and tools out there for themselves. They don't have a clear sense, though, of what to do or to what end. It's like trying to complete a college degree with no guidance at all. So at Livongo, we actually had all the elements to provide support for people managing chronic conditions. We had medical devices, digital tools for self-monitoring nutrition and activity levels, personalized content, and even human support through live coaching. But the challenge was how to combine these different elements and pieces effectively into a plan that leverages the strengths of each tool while also catering to an individual's needs. So with that in mind, we want to share what we've learned about how to deliver guidance on what to work on, why, and when for complex health issues like chronic conditions. And at this point, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Emma.
So before we reveal the solution that we at the end of our process, we're going to share 3 themes that emerged from our research and design process along the way that helped us think about how to add that value for people managing chronic conditions. And the first theme is structure. So when we thought about trying to break down that hairy problem of deciding what to do every day as a person managing multiple chronic conditions, we thought that we would start with what works today in the non-digital solution realm. So we sat down with a certified diabetes educator who spends all day working one-on-one with patients to make these kinds of changes. And she shared a story with us about a patient that we'll call Anne. So Anne came in for an appointment and she was interested in eating healthier, interested in exercising, lowering her blood sugar and losing weight. But she was really overwhelmed with where to start and how to create success for herself. So she worked with the diabetes educator and identified one small change that she could make that she felt was doable in the next week. They decided to, instead of drinking 32 ounces of diet soda per day, drink 16 ounces of diet soda, and that felt really achievable. And when Anne started to take on that change, she saw an immediate impact in her blood sugar and a very quick impact in her weight. And she was so overjoyed that this small change that had very little impact on her overall quality of life and her standard routines could have such big impact. It gave her the momentum that she needed to take on more lifestyle change and create a much longer, much more robust journey than what she was ready to take on in the beginning. So we translated that concept of Anne's one small change about diet soda into a concept overall of how do we break down lifestyle change and day-to-day decisions for managing chronic conditions into these bite-sized challenges that make it easier for people. Something to try today, something to try for the next week that might give me that aha moment and help me create some of that momentum for myself. But there are a lot of applications and programs out there that can tell you to eat more vegetables or go for a walk. We also wanted to incorporate the tools and resources that we know at Teladoc are really impactful for people managing chronic conditions. So it's not just a challenge to eat non-starchy vegetables. It's a challenge to try and make that change while having a food log dialogue with your coach who can help you identify recipes that might work for you or confront the barriers of convincing your family members to also eat those non-starchy vegetables that are helping you manage your condition. We also incorporated structured content. So I know Uyen mentioned that one of the barriers to self-monitoring can be not knowing what to do with your numbers. So we incorporate structured content that can help you interpret your fasting blood sugar and understand what that means for actions you should take, and structured eating plans that help answer some of those many questions when you say you want to try a different diet plan this week. So we've got our structured activities with the right tools and resources. The last thing that we wanted to take away from the power of Anne's story was the importance of self-monitoring as part of these activities. The reason that Anne felt so strongly about this diet soda change was that she saw the impact of the change that she made right away in her blood sugar and her weight. So every structured challenge that we created incorporated an element of self-monitoring to help people have that aha moment and give them that same reward and that feeling of momentum as soon as possible after they created lifestyle change for themselves.
Our theme is personalization. Along our journey of discovery, we tested the very simple and somewhat rigid plans, which were the 5-day challenges that Emma mentioned, and also very open-ended flexible plans as ways to combine the different elements of our program. Initially, we thought the ideal would be to remove all the friction and reduce complexity, just show people that one thing that they had to do to make an impact on their life. And we found that the rigid model was useful and motivating to some individuals. But we started to see that it's very difficult to understand the one tiny lifestyle that will actually resonate with an individual. There are so many factors that influence that choice that aren't immediately measurable, including preferences, likes, dislikes, your daily schedule, your family needs. It's hard to get all that information in a questionnaire. So what happened when we tried to provide people with a more flexible model? They felt more ownership over their choice and more satisfaction in finding something that meets their needs. During a diary study, one of the participants who chose to work on an exercise routine actually shared that routine with a group of friends during her vacation, folding it into the events in her life that we couldn't have visibility into. Another participant was pleased with how one of our activities set her up for a successful appointment with her new cardiologist because she was able to complete a series of blood pressure checks ahead of time and share her report with her care team. Ultimately, we found that people are actually happier with a model where we make recommendations of different combinations of tools and resources based on what we think would be clinically relevant for their health goals and status. But we ultimately let them choose which combination appeals to them most. So we made curated choice a central principle of the design, providing recommendations to help people who wanted that prescriptive approach while preserving the autonomy to choose options for those who need more flexibility. Overall, people have a sense that they're building a plan for themselves, not having a plan made for them by someone else.
Our third and final theme is clinical guidance. So if you think about the themes that we've covered so far around structure and personalization and choice, those are really about helping the end user decide what to do for themselves, which opened up a question for us of what is the role of a clinician in this experience, and what value might we provide that the average person with diabetes or hypertension who's using our product might not be able to provide for themselves. And this section was really inspired by an early foundational interview that we did with a man we'll call Carl. Carl was working with his doctor to manage his blood pressure. He was using a blood pressure cuff on a regular basis. He was sharing that data with his doctor. He had a whole system where his family would remind him to take his medication at the right time. Overall, he felt like he was on the right path and he was making a big effort to push for better health. But because he was so focused on managing his blood pressure, his blood sugar became uncontrolled in the background, and he ended up hospitalized for complications related to diabetes, which was really upsetting in general, but especially upsetting for Carl, who was like, I'm putting in the effort, right? I'm doing the work to reach better health, and yet I'm not getting the result that I'm looking for. And so we thought about, how does clinical guidance help people avoid those blind spots as they think about their day-to-day routine, while also keeping things simple and alleviating some of the burden of having to remember all of those different conditions at once. So the first element of clinical guidance that we incorporated was about self-monitoring upfront and creating a baseline. So you saw some of those structured activities that we put together. We incorporated a notion of self-monitoring into them for aha moments, but also to help us make sure that the people who are participating have a sense of their baseline across conditions and don't have a scenario like Carl where, because your blood sugar was unmonitored, you had an unexpected surprise. But what we don't want when we're encouraging you to self-monitor across multiple conditions is for you to feel like you have a to-do list for your blood sugar, a to-do list for your blood pressure, and a to-do list for your weight, because that can get really overwhelming quickly. So with each activity, we also tried to connect the dots between how the change that you're making could positively impact multiple conditions and make you feel like it's one plan across conditions with a cascade of positive effects. And finally, the last piece of clinical guidance that we incorporated into this plan experience is about long-term care. So in addition to all of these day-to-day choices about, did I take my medication? What am I going to eat for lunch? Did I sleep well? There are also a bunch of much longer timescale things that people with chronic conditions have to remember that have long-term impact on their health. So it's really important, for example, to get an annual eye exam to make sure that you're not heading down a path of diabetic retinopathy. That's not something that we want our end users to have to remember and proactively take care of on their own. That's something that we can carefully fold into the plan, maybe in a week when they aren't taking on too many other challenges, so that we can provide some of that buffer between them and the infinite list of things that they're expected to remember as a person managing diabetes or hypertension. So pulling together these three themes, structure, personalization, and clinical guidance, we can loop back a little bit to our metaphor of striving for better health being like trying to get a college degree without any guidance. So structure is sort of like your course catalog. It breaks down the universe of books that you could read or people that you could talk to into approachable units of effort, where if you do it, you'll definitely learn something, you'll definitely make some progress. Personalization is kind of like designing your own degree within those structured building blocks. So maybe we'll both study English, but I'll focus on poetry because that's what fits into my life and that's what brings me joy. We think there's a very similar dynamic here where we can both focus on improving the way that we eat to manage our diabetes, but we may take very different routes based on what we enjoy. And then finally, clinical guidance is like having an academic advisor who has seen other people go down your path and can help you avoid pitfalls and follow best practices as you're making your way on your journey. So with a big drum roll, we brought together these three themes to create Action Plan, which is a new experience that actually went live during Q1. It's built on a foundation of structured activities that break down the universe of things you might do to manage your chronic conditions into short, approachable, time-bound activities that incorporate a lifestyle change alongside some self-monitoring to help you create those aha moments for what works for you. It incorporates both personalization and choice. So we do make recommendations for what we think an individual should include in their plan, but ultimately the end user selects their goals and selects their activities and constructs the plan for themselves to give them that feeling of ownership over what they've decided to take on this week. And that allows for some of that flexibility that Uyen was talking about earlier, it's exciting to take on an exercise activity this week because you're on vacation with your friends, and that's something special that we want to make sure we enable. And finally, clinical guidance is baked both into the way that the activities are structured with that incorporation of self-monitoring and in the recommendations that we make to help people balance their effort across the different conditions that they're managing.
There are actually over 120 activities that our talented team put together for Action Plan, and these activities vary in length, difficulty, tools, and areas of focus. So here's an activity here where people are trying to manage high blood pressure. It combines education and self-discovery to understand how to limit sodium in your diet, which can in turn help prevent high blood pressure. There are actually some great recipes and ideas that our content team developed to replace sodium with salt-free seasonings and herbs. And then here we have another activity that helps people eat healthy by getting a better sense of what feeling full is like. Most of the time, food logging can feel like quite a chore, where you're really on your own to discover patterns, and you don't really know where to stop, except for when you actually grow tired of just documenting every meal that you eat. So instead of endless logging, we ask people to complete a focused burst of it for just one day. Reflect on that experience, and then talk to your nutrition expert. And there are 2 tactics to take away from this activity. 1, generate momentum for larger changes by starting small and identifying the minimum amount of effort to get something valuable out of that experience. And 2, provide immediate and meaningful feedback on information that you get from users. And we wanted to wrap up with this quote. One of the diary study interviews we conducted, we had a participant with diabetes who provided this feedback on Action Plan. Before, it was just going into a log. It was like, if you took it, you took it. If you didn't, you didn't. I knew every day this little checkbox was going to come, so that was more motivating. And so from this quote, it seemed like he was just checking blood sugar because he knew he needed to do it, but didn't have a good internal sense of why or when to check. When he tried out Action Plan, just having that little checkbox in the user interface alongside our instructions for when to log his blood sugar made a big difference. This quote really reflects our journey, where we started off with a kit of tools and features, relying on people's self-motivation to piece together the different parts. Now, with the introduction of something like Action Plan, we provide a way for people to build a plan that fits into their lifestyle and can actually make an impact on their health. When you're living with something like a chronic condition, which affects you for so many years, potentially for life, why not have a plan to help you manage everything and thrive? And with that, thank you so much. We're very happy to answer any questions afterwards. Our contact information is here. We also want to acknowledge our colleagues who couldn't be here, who are very much a part of this effort.